So, welcome back to American National Government. We will be continuing our study of the First Amendment by looking at freedom of speech and of the press. And it's a rather important amendment. I hope you would agree, worthy of more study than I have been giving it in past semesters. So we're remedying that, starting with you guys. So it is emphatically the province and duty of the Judicial Department to say what the law is. If two laws conflict with each other, the courts must decide on the operation of each. So said Chief Justice John Marshall in Marbury versus Madison. So by the end of this, you are going to be able to explain the importance of the two basic purposes of the guarantees of free expression. You shall be able to summarize how the Supreme Court has limited seditious speech and obscenity. We'll be able to examine the issues of prior restraint and press confidentiality, and describe the limits the court has placed on the media. We will also be able to define symbolic and commercial speech and describe the limits on their exercise. So let's get started. Let's dig in. So, did you know, more than 2,000 years ago, a Greek philosopher named Diogenes said the most beautiful thing in the world is free speech. So just as ancient Greece valued freedom of speech, United States citizens also rightly regarded as one of their most fundamental rights. In fact, the nation's founders included this freedom as a basic part of the First Amendment they added to the Constitution. And in ruling on Neer versus Minnesota, Chief Justice Charles Evans Hughes declared that prior restraint was the essence of censorship, but acknowledged four possible circumstances in which he felt censorship might be allowed. I'm having a little trouble with English today, I'm sorry. When something printed was obscene, weakened national security, invaded private rights, or incited violence. So when something printed was obscene. Let's see. Maybe I was watching The Crown the other day. No, I'm not even going to comment on that. Weakened national security. So somebody prints the blueprints to our nuclear submarines in a paper, and it goes all worldwide, and everybody could see it. It invaded private rights. So maybe somebody took a picture of me in my backyard playing with my daughter. I have a reasonable expectation of privacy in my backyard. I could sue. Incited violence. January 6th. We'll just keep it to the basics. I'm not passing judgment or comment or anything like that, but Trump spoke, people went to the Capitol and rioted. So how important is the two-way free exchange of ideas? Vitally important. It's how we keep our government going. Free speech is essential to government. We have to feel free, perfectly free, to say what we think to our elected representatives. And for them, congressmen and senators at both the state and federal level, to be able to speak to each other without fear of punishment or anything else happening to them about how they feel about a bill, a law, etc. If we don't have that, if people are afraid to say what they think about a law that's about to be passed or something of that sort, we don't have a republic anymore. How has the Supreme Court limited seditious speech and obscenity? We'll find out about that one. What are the issues of prior restraint and press confidentiality? Now, the press, traditionally, it's protected its sources. If a source asks to remain anonymous, a journalist will respect that. Journalists have gone to jail protecting sources. What limits have the court placed on the media? We'll find out. And what are symbolic speech and commercial speech? Symbolic speech, as I said, flag burning is a great example of that. Let's say, you hate my guts after this semester, and you come to the school and you stand outside and you have a picture of me and you burn it. That is certainly symbolic. It's sending a picture of how you feel about me. Oh, commercial speech, excuse me, selling stuff, what you say to sell stuff. This product is great. You know, this cup of coffee is the best cup of coffee that has ever been made. You know, stuff like that. Simple. So freedom of speech and freedom of press guarantees are meant to protect each person's right of free expression, whether spoken, written, or communicated in any other way. Now, this right is not absolute. You cannot, for example, I'm safe if I do stick with me, if you cannot, for example, spread a pamphlet around Illinois Central College that says that I fail every student that I don't like. Okay, that's not true. It's emphatically not true. You know, I go out of my way to make sure you guys pass. Right? Those are, to my mind anyway, fighting words. Those are certainly liable because it's a lie. The clue is in the definition is in the word. Protect all persons' right to a complete discussion of public affairs. Okay, pretty self-explanatory. Freedom of speech and freedom of press do not protect liable, as I said. He fails every student he doesn't like. The false and malicious use of written words. Slander. The false and malicious use of spoken words. All right. So you go around and you talk about how terrible I am because a test I gave was completely unfair, even though the answers to all the questions could be found in the slides. And, you know, you're mad I failed it, so, you know, you go around and you talk about what a bad teacher I am. These are not serious examples, at least I hope not, but that you would be slandering me. Obscenity. All right. Obscenity, I hope you know what that is. You know, words that incite others to commit crimes. All right. Something's got to be done about Parker. We've got to drive him out of this school. Let's all go to his office and torch it. You would be committing a crime. Seditious speech. All right. It's the crime of attempting to overthrow the government by force or to disrupt its lawful activities by violent acts. Seditious speech is speech that urges such conduct. Now I point again to January 6th as an example of this. You could disagree, and a lot of people do. Just take it for what it's worth. If you don't like the example, then ignore the example. So Congress has enacted 3 major laws to prevent sedition and seditious speech. 1, the Alien and Sedition Acts. They made scandalous or false criticism of the government illegal. And that expired before Thomas Jefferson took office in 1801. Now, interesting note about that. Adams Sr., that is, and Thomas Jefferson did not get along by that point. So the Alien and Sedition Acts made it illegal to bring the president, senators, congressmen, etc., into disrepute. What was left out of that was the vice president. So Adams and company didn't particularly care what was said about Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, truthfully, probably didn't care what was said about Thomas Jefferson. But it expired. The Sedition Act of 1917, another one of our not-so-proud moments, made it a crime to encourage disloyalty or spread anti-government ideas during a time of crisis. And it was upheld by the Supreme Court in instances of clear and present danger. Now, why I say not one of our finer moments, because people were arrested for literally standing outside of a town hall and handing out copies of the Constitution. to show, what was going on during World War I was probably not kosher with what the founders had in mind. That's why I say not one of our finer moments. The Smith Act of 1940 forbade advocating violent overthrow of the government and belonging knowingly to any group that does. The Supreme Court still upholds the constitutionality of the law, but over time has modified it so that it is difficult to enforce, and it should be difficult to enforce. Because I don't know how you actually prove that if you don't belong to the group. I don't know. That's one we could have some debate on. Obscenity. Those laws are enforced under the postal power. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 7, the post office. And they had a test laid out in Miller versus California, so the average person finds that the work appeals to prurient interests, judging from contemporary standards. So the work describes offensive sexual conduct that is specifically outlawed as obscene. The work lacks serious value of any variety. And this is the test. If any one of these questions comes back, yes, according to a court, you've violated the obscenity laws. Okay, I just looked it up because, I am not a computer. This word, prurient, means having or encouraging an excessive interest in sexual matters. So prior restraint. So in most cases, the government cannot curb ideas before they are expressed. And thank goodness. It can punish ideas after they are expressed, because if they were able to punish them before they were expressed, we'd be getting into the thought police. And SCOTUS has held in several cases that the guarantee of a free press doesn't allow the government to exercise prior restraint on publication, except in grave circumstances. So, for instance, during wartime. So in Neer versus Minnesota, the court protected the rights of even miscreant purveyors of scandal. Very nice way of putting it. New York versus U.S., the government sought a court order to keep newspapers from printing the Pentagon Papers. And I won't get into that, but you should do a little research. That was an interesting time in our history. And these had been stolen and leaked to the press, so the Supreme Court said that the government couldn't show that the papers endangered national security enough to justify prior restraint of publication. So they were, I said I wasn't going to get into it, so the papers were published, there was suitable public outrage, Nixon was damaged, but again, as you should know, it wasn't until Watergate that he resigned. One. So the relationship between the freedom of speech and press amendments and the media. So confidentiality. So the Supreme Court said the Constitution does not allow members of the news media to keep their sources confidential in a court of law. So 30 states have passed shield laws to give reporters at least some protection against having to reveal sources. Motion pictures. So in Mutual Film Corporation v. Ohio, 1915, the Supreme Court said that motion pictures were a business and not a form of expression. It's interesting to me. I've never really considered that question. And so we're not protected under the freedom of expression guarantees. And they reversed the decision in Burston versus Wilson in 1952. I wonder what happened in 1915 that brought that on. That's an interesting question. If any of you want to find out, I'll toss you a couple points of extra credit. I'll make it 3. I'll toss you 3 points extra credit if you want to find out for me where the motion picture thing came in, because I wonder what was so bad. Mutual Film Corporation in 1915 got sued. So both radio and television media are subject to more government regulation than other forms of expression because they are transmitted by public airwaves. Private corporations do not own the airwaves. We do. We, the taxpayer, they are our airwaves. So do you favor or oppose state shield laws to protect news reporters? Explain your reasons. And I haven't made up my mind. If you see something up for homework for this week, then that would probably be a good question that I would ask. Most states have passed shield laws, so this is a good place to stop. We'll come back for part 2 of this in a minute.